Should we give Jiu-Jitsu to bad cops? That's the question. And every time I post a law enforcement video, GST, Gracie Breakdown, people ask this. They say, man, Henner, people comment in the comment section, they say, Henner, you shouldn't be teaching Jiu-Jitsu to cops because if it's a cop is a bad cop, they're gonna be even worse with Jiu-Jitsu. You're gonna give them tools and weapons to do even more damage. That's the general consensus from people who disagree with giving Jiu-Jitsu to law enforcement as a whole, is that in giving it to all the cops, you might be giving it to some bad cops. And my question to you guys is giving, and listen, giving Jiu-Jitsu to good cops is the best thing on the planet. That's already been proven. The data already proves that. I'm asking a new, much more challenging question. Should we give Jiu-Jitsu to bad cops? Well, Henry, how do you know who the bad cops are? You don't. That's the whole point. But is it better if a bad cop knows Jiu-Jitsu than if a bad cop does not know Jiu-Jitsu? That's the question I'm asking. And the default answer that I've seen on internet world is no. Don't give Jiu-Jitsu to cops because if a bad cop gets it, it's even worse. Well, let me pose some additional questions. Cops generally are already armed and equipped with taser, better yet, taser, cross draw, firearm. Taser and firearm. If they already have a taser and a firearm, those are, right, taser's a taser and a firearm is a deadly force tool or weapon that can be used to kill someone. My theory, and this has not been proven by any means, but I'm just throwing it out there for your consideration, is that if a cop already has a taser and a firearm, and we give them, let's just call it here, taser and firearm. Let's say we give them 8 additional tools. Look at these hands. These are taser, firearm, every cop already has. Let's add 8 additional, just because I only have 10 fingers, for the sake of discussion, 8 incredibly effective Jiu-Jitsu control tactics. We're talking about mount, guard, punch block series, escapes, shrimp escapes, top mount, side mount, arrest and control transitions, submissions even, maybe an arm bar, maybe a joint lock for arrest and control procedure. So you give them all these other techniques that are control tactics. What they all have in common is they give control to an officer in a worst case scenario. My question to you guys is this. This is a bad cop. Why is the cop bad? Who knows? Maybe it's racial. Maybe it's prejudice. Maybe it's the cop has a power trip. For any number of reasons that a bad cop is a bad cop. There can be many. But let's say you have a bad cop. My question to you guys is this. Is a bad cop without Jiu-Jitsu, only a taser and a gun, better than a bad cop with taser and gun and all of these nonviolent control tactics, which are by their nature de-escalatory? Which one is better? This cop, who when they feel overwhelmed and they have an amygdala hijack in the middle of a chaotic situation where they have an actual or perceived loss of control, is this cop better? Taser and gun is all they have. Or the same bad cop with all these other tools to pull from that they learned from Jiu-Jitsu, in our case, GST, Gracie Survival Tactics, now post-certified in California for full arrest and control credit, the only Jiu-Jitsu school in California to achieve this distinguished honor. Is this cop better with the tactics or is the cop better off without? This is the question. I think of it like a dartboard. Imagine you have a dart and you have a dart board. And on the dart board, everywhere that the dart hits is the use of a tool. They're gonna use that tool. My theory is that if the dartboard only has a black half and a red half, black half is taser, red half is firearm. They're gonna use their firearm. That's it. And they throw the dart. And every time that officer, bad cop, uses force, they're hitting one of those 2 darts and one of those 2 targets because that's all they have at their disposal. My hope and my belief, without absolute data-driven certainty yet, my belief, and I'm working on that, by the way, I have some very top secret missions we're working on to prove this beyond a reasonable doubt, that a bad cop is better off with Jiu-Jitsu. But hear me out. My belief is that if we have the dartboard and instead of red and black, we have green, purple, blue, yellow, orange, boom, 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 all these other little plots of color, is so that even if that officer, the bad cop who throws his dart on his use of force board, he's more likely to not hit red or black, taser or firearm, if there are simply other colors on the board for them to hit. And let's also consider so it's just more options on the tool belt. So statistically, the cop who could always resort to these, if it's justifiable, they trigger, they can just use it. They always have that. They always have the deadly force available to them. I'm saying if you give them other options, are they statistically less likely to resort to their gun than they would have previously? Now, I'm not saying that they won't use their jiu-jitsu and then put a little extra pressure on that submission or throw a little extra punch to the ribs when they don't need to. That's still a bad cop using jiu-jitsu. I get it. But what I'm saying is the likelihood of escalation to the more dangerous uses of force, right? You taser someone on their feet, they fall and they crack their head on the skull on the ground. People die potentially. Or the taser misfires. Now the cop is overwhelmed or doesn't have the proper connection. The cop is overwhelmed, pulls their gun and shoots, as we've seen so many times when a jiu-jitsu trained officer could have mitigated that situation with the use of their limbs, their legs, and their situation and their guard and their whole jiu-jitsu arsenal. So, think about it this way. Let's say the cop is a bad cop because of their power trip, right? Everyone has had an experience with an officer. We all know great officers. The cop comes in, does the job, clean and effective, but we also had officers who it's clear that the default interaction is, man, what kind of trip is this cop on right now? Like, I'm just being normal with them and they're on edge. And again, they have a very challenging job. We appreciate their work. We need law enforcement. I'm just saying there are some cops, I've met some, I've worked with some, and I've heard about the interactions with some from other cops who are on the power trip. They love that became a cop. They love the aspect. They get a gun and a badge. I'm in charge now. So that exists. And let's say we have a cop who is a corrosive officer because of the degree to which they're on the power trip of being a cop. It's a percentage of them, by no means the majority, but it exists. Let's say you have a power trip cop. What does power trip mean? That they have this inferiority complex regarding power. They're on a power trip, that they need to feel in control. They need to feel power in a situation. Well, guess what? If the only way they're going to feel powerful is by pulling a trigger, they're going to be pulling triggers left and right. What I'm proposing is even the power tripping bad cop, we give him non-trigger utilizing control-based tactics so that he or she can achieve the same sense of power that I feel every single day in the gym. Put me to spar with anybody, and I'm like, yeah, I have full domination and control of this other human being that I'm sparring with right now. And sometimes I'm the one getting controlled myself. So it's not always a win. I spar with he's on the power trip over me. But my point is, I can control someone in sparring in jiu-jitsu, and I feel absolute control and power over them in that moment. What I'm saying is, if power is what the power tripping cop is after, does jiu-jitsu not give them several degrees of power before the one use of power, right, taser, and then ultimately deadly force, firearm, the one use of power that there's no coming back from? So back to the original question, is a bad cop better or worse with jiu-jitsu? That's the question. If we could choose all bad cops, and let's say we couldn't isolate them and get rid of them, I would love to just get rid of them. Just get rid of them, isolate them. I have another plan for how to identify the bad cops in all the mix, and we can do this and we can single them out, which is what we should try to do. Until then, if we're gonna teach 100 cops and 2 of them are bad power tripping or have racial prejudice or whatever they might be guiding their law enforcing, if the fact, and I'm not saying those are the ratios, I'm just saying, let's just say there's 2 out of 100, should we teach the 100 jiu-jitsu knowing that the 2 are also gonna get it? And if those 2 get it, are they better cops or are they slightly worse for being in the bad cop category for having learned jiu-jitsu? That's the question. You see where I'm leaning. I'm not saying it's gonna make a bad cop a good cop by any means, because it's hard to make bad people good people. What I am saying though is the tendency towards deadly force can be greatly reduced. This is my hypothesis, yet to be proven. In a bad cop, if we provide them lower levels of force, de-escalatory physical and verbal skills, and give them a sense of control, where so many cops feel so deficient due to their disastrous undertraining that takes place. That's our goal. 1 hour of jiu-jitsu every week for every officer in America would do this, would lower the overall level of force. We already have several partnerships being established, and we are eager to establish several more. Go to gracieuniversity.com/reform for all the data regarding our current success. Download the PDF handbook regarding the partnership for law enforcement and Gracie University. And if you're out there doing jiu-jitsu, there's never been a better time. And if you own a jiu-jitsu school, we need more certified training centers right now because we cannot meet the demand for the number of police departments that want to partner with jiu-jitsu schools to offer this type of weekly training, supplementary, sponsored by the agency, provided by the CTC. We cannot meet all the demand. So we need more schools right now. There's never been a better time to join Team Gracie University in that regard. And listen, you guys, you know why we're doing this. It's very simple. We're going to take this whole law enforcement training disaster, we're going to put a U-turn on it and take it in a whole different direction in terms of a brighter future where every cop is more well-trained. Every cop has options, several nonviolent control options before they ever need to pull the trigger. If I was a cop, taser and a gun, I might need to use it one day. But I'm just telling you, the threshold of violence and danger that would be necessary to warrant me having to use, to force me to have to use those levels of force are so much higher because of the training that I've received in the jiu-jitsu practice. Thanks for joining me. This was an impromptu live regarding the one question. Does a bad cop who learns jiu-jitsu become slightly better? Or should we leave bad cops with no nonviolent control options and let them pull the trigger much sooner? Love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time. I got to teach a class right now.